excellent question. You apply international law. You apply international law. You allow the United Nations to do its job. When the Hamas situation happened, for example, it was supposed to be the Red Cross to go and negotiate. Israel is stopping all of that. On top of that, it's also terrorizing the media. On top of that, it's also terrorizing individuals. On top of that, it has money being poured in from the United States. On top of that, it has the backing of the European Union. On top of that, it has the backing of Britain that started this whole farce. So what ends up happening is who's speaking for the Palestinian people. So for a solution to happen, you need to empower the United Nations so that Israel is not making a mockery of the United Nations. How am I needing to reiterate this more and more? I am giving you a solution.
Rahma, you're giving me your solution.
And you're still telling me Hamas.
Rahma, you've just given me...
There will always be Hamas if you occupy a people. Let me just finish this point. If you occupy a people, if you occupy a people, if women in labor are having to give birth at checkpoints, if you're having people imprisoned, if you're having this merciless bombardment of Palestinians, you are going to breed Hamas. It starts with the stronger party.
So I want us to watch this heated debate by Piers Morgan and Rahma Zain. And also, please don't forget to leave your thoughts and opinion in the comment section below. And before we get to it, right, the reason why I like us to watch debates like this is because we get to hear each other's point of view. And because I'm someone who believes in the power of information, I'm someone who believes that we ought to listen to both sides of an argument before we can make our judgment. And we do not have to follow one way or the other. Let's just take everything in and then use our own critical mindset to process it. Because if we just listen to one person talk, we might be forced to be against the other person. Likewise, if we listen to the other person talk, we might be forced to be against the other person. But if we hear both sides of an argument, we will be able to make an informed decision on the situation. That is the reason why I like to bring forth this debate, so that you guys can hear what the debaters are saying, and you guys can make an informed decision on what you think is the problem or what you think the solution would be. So let's get on with this Piers debate.
We've got a slight delay in the connection between us, so I'm going to ask you questions and give you time to answer them rather than try and talk over you, because that isn't going to work given the delay. So let me just ask you, first of all, you were on CNN. I know Clarissa Ward, the correspondent that you were very passionate towards. In my opinion, having worked at CNN, she is one of the best foreign correspondents in the world. And I felt absolutely has tried to straddle this very tricky line of reporting fairly and accurately on what is a horrendous conflict. When you look back at yourself in that exchange with Clarissa, how do you feel about the way that you addressed her? Do you have any regret? Or do you feel you could have expressed yourself differently? Or do you feel that it accurately represented how you were feeling?
I'm not going to waste my time talking about the report with Clarissa because this takes away from the point. You mentioned before there was a deadlock in the debate. There's no deadlock in the debate. There is terror in the debate. You are unable to debate with Israel because what's happened so far is we're witnessing the sick relationship between the United States and Israel, where basically the United States has given a permission for Israel to have genocide on ground. And what's happened is we're seeing no one can say no to Israel. The United Nations isn't able to say no to Israel without repercussions. Media figures aren't able to say no to Israel without repercussions. So what ends up happening is that you're basically raising a spoiled brat you're unable to say no to, that has now grown up to be a sociopath. And let me reiterate that the relationship between the United States and Israel is putting the world in jeopardy. So what we're witnessing now is a serious issue where both parties need to reassess their relationship. I understand that Biden, because he's pitted his own people against each other and wasted billions of dollars giving them to Israel instead of looking at his own homeless, his own medical care issue, his own student loans issue. So a lot of American people are also extremely angry, and they're also looking at unfair coverage. The reason this video has gone so viral, one, it's alarming that it's gone so viral, because what should be going viral is the footage that we are witnessing out of Palestine, out of the occupied territories, of children being massacred. It's not a war. A war assumes that both parties are on equal footing.
Okay, I hear you. What I would say in response to that is that on October the 7th, Hamas, who are the ruling authority in Gaza, committed an act of such heinous terrorism, killing 1,500 people, including 260 people at a music festival.
Okay, in 1948,
let me finish, Rahma, let me finish.
What happened
let me just
then?
ask, let me just say,
the militia?
Rahma, let me just ask you the question.
No,
you have to let me ask a question. I've been very polite to you and respectful. I've let you have your say. I'm going to say something now to you, and you can respond.
Bear in mind there's a delay, so this isn't exactly the easiest debate to have.
Well, that's why I said at the start, why don't we let me ask questions, you answer them, and that's the way this can proceed in a respectful manner. I would simply say to you that I've had a number of pro-Palestinian voices on this program in the last 2 weeks, and a number of pro-Israel voices. Many of the pro-Palestinian people I've had on have been very quick to condemn what Hamas did on October the 7th. Some have not. What's your position? Before we get to what you just said to me about what Israel has done and what America's doing and so on, what is your view as someone in Egypt about what happened right on your border there in Gaza by Hamas against Israel?
It's a very fair question. But the thing is, maybe I have a privilege being so close to the border, having many Palestinian friends, knowing more history, that I understand that once you oppress a people, and again, I'm not justifying what happened. The killing of civilians on both parts ought to be condemned. But the danger in you starting an interview asking me to condemn Hamas then pours into Israel's blind defense of its own state, which ends up killing over 5,000 Palestinians, over 700 dead. And going back to the report that you were discussing at the beginning with the CNN reporter, the issue with that is everything is always taken out of context. And this is the issue we have with Western media. Had the journalist been there on ground with the volunteers that night, as for example I was, she would have listened to the bombardment of Israeli bombs that start from 2:30 a.m. and do not stop. She would have also witnessed the fact that we would get an okay from Israel's side. I'm not done. From Israel's side, that the supplies would go in, and then it's like they toy with your morale so that for hope from both sides is stopped. The narrative has got to change.
Okay,
the idea. I, for example, I don't have the PR of Israel. I don't have the money to hire the Justin Biebers of the world and have them say pray for Israel and whatnot. But what I do have is the truth. And the reason this video has gone so viral is because people felt it. People felt that it was the truth.
Let me ask a question, Rahma. So my question is this. When Hamas did what they did on October the 7th, they will have known, absolutely known, that Israel's response would have been this. And it would have involved the deaths of many thousands of innocent people in Gaza as a consequence of going after Hamas. They will have known that. So my question for you, again, a difficult question. I appreciate this, given that you're right there in the middle of all this. But the difficult question is, how do regular Palestinian people feel that their ruling authority commit an act of terror so heinous, and they must have known how Israel would respond, and they must have known that many thousands of innocent Palestinians would die as a consequence of that terror attack. How do they feel about that? Are they comfortable with Hamas continuing to be the ruling authority in Gaza? Or is it actually an act of such appalling atrocity that Hamas should no longer be there? And if the answer is that Palestinian people don't want them to be there anymore, then how do you get rid of them?
Unfortunately, the Palestinian people don't have the luxury of the time to think of Hamas. The voice notes we're receiving from our Palestinian brothers and sisters from under the rubble, from mothers who've lost their children, from home families that have been eradicated. The sentiment we're getting from the Palestinian people is, do they see us? If the United Nations, that's whole premise was to avoid this kind of genocide, was created to avoid this kind of humanitarian crisis, cannot stand up to one spoiled brat of a fascist organization, then where are we in this world? And what's sad is that it's a top-down movement. You have the United Nations unable to speak to Israel. You also have the people at work who cannot hold the Palestinian flag, who get fired on the spot. I've had people who work in New York text me and tell me that they've been fired on the spot.
Rahma, I have a
you know what
question.
else I've had that unfortunately I cannot show? Screenshots, last thing, screenshots of emails from prominent news channels where anchors, where younger people are emailing producers, begging, are emailing one another, begging, why aren't we showing the other side? Why aren't you showing the other side? Because what's happened is that
I have to be able to respond.
Israel has given you a brand book where you can, so that you can be prim and proper in front of your own people.
I have to be able to respond,
They've been very
Rahma.
clear about their intent. They've been very clear since the Haganah.
You have to let me respond now.
I think Piers said that because of the distance between them, he was going to ask the question and then wait for her to respond. But you can see when he asks the question and when the girl is trying to respond, he jumps in, forgetting that he has already pledges to ask and then wait for her to explain. But the question Piers asks about how the Palestinians are feeling or how they felt when they hear the atrocities that Hamas did in Israel and how Hamas killed about 1,400 people. I think that most Palestinians wouldn't like that. I think that most Palestinians wouldn't appreciate that. And I think that Palestinians just want to be in peace. But if you are someone who has constantly been oppressed, if you are someone who has constantly been living in a slave-like condition, if you are someone who has constantly been living in an open-air prison, if you are someone whose right to self-determination has been taken away by an entity, if you are someone who cannot leave your land without getting permission from somebody, if you are someone who have seen how your neighbor or an entity has encroached on your property, has kicked you off from your property, has built illegal settlement on your property, and has even told you you have no right to your own properties, then your mindset about them start to change. Let me tell you guys a story. Like most of you guys know, most of Central and West Africa was colonized by France. And France would claim that they have given those countries in Central and West Africa independence. And those countries are free. Those countries have their legitimate governments, and those countries govern themselves. That's what France would claim. But France controls every single thing in that country. France controls the education. France controls the government. France controls the resources. France even has the first right to refusal in those countries that were their former colonies in Central and West Africa. So, what do you think the opinion about France in that country would be like? What do you think the people in that country, the common mass and powers, would think about France? What do you think the general sentiment, the general feelings about France in that country would be like? I don't think that any person in those French-speaking African countries, for example, those in the Sahel, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, will have any favorable thoughts about France. Because in their minds, France is the enemy. In their minds, France has totally destroyed their country. In their minds, France has put in puppet leaders that France has used to get all what France needs from their country. And they are just like a milking cow for France. It's the same thing with the people in Gaza. If you are a local Gazian who is living in Gaza, and you can clearly see the way your life is, you can see the way people in your community live. And beyond a fence, you can see those other people living happily, living living their best life. And you in Gaza cannot even get out of Gaza without those people over there saying you can get out. How would you feel? How would you feel? I think Piers should be the one to answer this question. And do not get me wrong. I love Piers, and I think he is doing a fantastic job trying to put these people on air, try to get their point of view, which I think is a great thing. But I just believe that, or I just think that certain questions should also be put to Piers. And I understand that he is a journalist and their job is to ask questions to get response. I understand that. But I just feel that maybe we can also get his own opinion on something like that. And let's ask Piers, if Piers were one of those Gazians living in Gaza, if Piers had his family in Gaza, if Piers' mom and dad live in Gaza, or maybe his wife and his children were living in Gaza, and with the slave-like conditions that the Gazians are made to go through, how would Piers feel about Israel? Will Piers have a favorable view of Israel? That is the question. That is the question.